you single and waiting for Mr. Right? Are you in a relationship but still not quite sure if he's the one? Are you married and sometimes wondering if you've made the right decision? If you answered yes to any of these questions, then this podcast is for you. I am your host, Sharon Tillman, and welcome to the He's Worth the Wait podcast. This podcast is to promote healthy, whole relationships and to educate you on how to produce the very best version of yourself so you can meet the very best version of the one who has been chosen for you. Go with me as I share my story, as I share my journey, as I share my truth and my testimony while inspiring, uplifting, and encouraging you to know that He is worth the wait. Let's talk. Hello, and welcome to another episode of He's Worth the Wait podcast. How y'all doing today? Oh my God, let me first say thank you so much for those who have reached out. I am like 2 weeks behind in my podcast, and I do apologize. I've had a lot happening. I just had my very first women empowerment brunch on last weekend, and so there was a lot of preparation and things that went into that, and so I was not able to record then. And then the week before I was still working on that, but then I had some school stuff going on, and so it's been a lot happening. I've had a few podcast that I pre-recorded, but it wasn't anything that I necessarily wanted to put out at that time. So I wasn't able to just put something out. I want to be really intentional with this podcast. I want to be really, as much as possible, I want to give what's given to me in that moment. And for what I already had, I didn't want to put that out. So nevertheless, thank you guys for just rocking with me. Thank you guys for just holding on. Thank you guys for just not giving up and like, oh my God, girl, you 2 weeks in, what's going on? I am on here now and I am ready to give you what I got. Listen, you'll be surprised at the hour that it is that I even have to record this, but I have to be very intentional and very strategic in the time, that is given to me, and I have to make sure that I steward my time well. That's a word that God has really given me in this season. So there are some things that God has been dealing with me in this particular season of my life. And I've heard God say on more than one occasion, steward in how I'm stewarding a situation, how I'm stewarding, and I keep hearing that thing. So I know that is something that God is really dealing with me in. So that is one of my words. I'm just going to drop that down there for you. But in my stewardship of this podcast, in my stewardship of my time in general, just making sure that I am able to be balanced in everything that I have to do. And that's definitely a podcast that I want to come on here and talk about. And it might be something that I do as far as next week, just because I've had so much happening within the last couple of weeks. I think next week would be a great time to kind of insert that, and to kind of talk about balance and time and just listening to our bodies, listening to ourselves, just making sure That when we need the time, we take the time. When we need to self-care, we self-care. When we need to do it, we do it. So like I said, that's another podcast for another day. I want to definitely jump into that some next week, even if it's not the main podcast, because I am 2 weeks behind. So I can give you guys an extra one in there on next week. I've had some things to be alleviated from my plate just a little bit. So I may have a little extra time to give you two next week. But I definitely want to make sure that at least one of those is something that I talk about. So I'm not going to be on here with you guys long at all. I want to kind of just get straight to the point of what I am talking about today. And then I'll be able to come back and hopefully spend a little extra time with you guys for next week. But I was posed this very question today. And in my delivery of speaking to this individual, I was prompted to just get on here and talk about this. It was something that I was really passionate about because I remember seeing myself in this situation. You guys know I'm super transparent, right? So that is my thing. There is really nothing, like honestly, there is nothing that God has healed me from. There is nothing that I have gone through. There is nothing that I've experienced that I've come to on the other side that God doesn't allow me to help somebody with. I'm so grateful that I learned so long ago that we don't just go through for ourselves. We don't just go through just to say, oh, I've been through this. It's not like a notch on our belt. It's not like it's not a part of our resume per se to just say, oh, how our resume does. Oh, I've worked here. Oh, I've worked there. Oh, I have this experience. It's not just a part of our resume that we go through the things in life that we go through. It is also for other people. Our go through is sometimes for the people who are connected to us, for the people who are assigned to us, for the people who are going to come up behind, the people that God is going to have us to encourage, the people that God is going to allow us to minister to in whatever capacity. Don't let the word minister throw you off. A lot of times when you're thinking of minister, people automatically go to the pulpit, automatically go to there. But no, we all have our form of ministry. We all have that ministry, no matter what it is that you do, serving, however, we all have that. Okay. So I didn't want to throw anybody off there, but however God chooses to use you within the ministry that he's chosen for you, we all have that opportunity to witness to someone, to be of an encouragement to someone, to allow someone to know that if God did it for me, that he can do it for you, because he doesn't have a respect of person. To allow someone to know that if God did it for me, that he can do it for you, because there's nothing about me that made him do it for me that he won't do it for you. If I can overcome, you can overcome. The same God, thank you, Lord, the same God who did it for me is the very same God who can do it for you. If he can deliver me, he can deliver you. So I'm so grateful that so long ago I learned that, and I had to learn it, guys, because I went through so many things in my life that I literally had to learn it. I had to really get into the posture of God, to really get into the heart of the mind of God, so that I can understand. And don't get me wrong, there are still things in my life that I don't always understand. And I can almost guarantee you that the things that I now understand, I didn't understand in the midst of going through. I didn't understand in the midst of the process that God had me in. I didn't know what the purpose was for what he was doing at that very moment. But as he continued to work inside of me, as I continued to pray that God would reveal his purpose and his plan for my life, even through the things that I was going through, then it allowed my posture to change, and to be more open, to be more receptive of what God is cultivating me for. because there was a season in my life where I didn't steward it well. Thank you, Holy Ghost. There's that word again. There was a season in my life that I didn't steward well because I wasn't aware. I didn't know. And instead of me trying to understand, instead of me, being in that place of like, okay, God, I don't necessarily understand what you're doing, but I trust you. I don't understand why you're taking me here, but I trust you with my life. And I know that this got something to do with where you're taking me. Somehow or another, somewhere along this road, I know that you're going to use me in this area. I don't know when. I don't know why. I don't know where, but I know that this is for a reason. Help me to do this the right way. Help me to go through this the right way. Help me to get the things out of this that you are calling me to get out of. And when I was in that place, it was not necessarily easier because I don't want to ever give a false narrative of anything. Sometimes going through is challenging because in the moment of going through, your faith is being tested at the same time that you are, you're being proven by God, or you're being used by God, or, that God is stripping you of things, or God is crushing you, or God is breaking you, or whatever his purpose is in that moment. So I don't want to ever give a false narrative, but I can say that when my posture was different, so was my outcome. When my posture was different, so was my go through. When my posture was different, my ability to adjust, my ability to understand, my ability to get to the other side of it was different as well. And just stripping us from that woe is me mentality, stripping us from that, okay, God, I don't know why I'm here. Why me? Like, why am I going through? Why am I still there? There was a season in my life where I was there. I was her. And I really struggled in that place. And I think the more that we just ask those questions and the more that we have that woe is me mentality, the longer that we stay there. Because ultimately, God is always trying to get something to us. Ultimately, he is always trying to pull something out of us. Ultimately, he is always trying to cultivate or to create, make, mold, and shape into us exactly what he's called us to be, right? And so in the season of going through, in our seasons of crushing, in our seasons, and I don't know why I'm here. I don't know why I'm here. This has nothing to do with what I'm talking about, but somebody needs this. But in those seasons of going through, in those seasons of crushing, in those seasons of really, of God really doing something within us, stripping us, or however, sometimes even stretching us. Thank you, Holy Ghost. Sometimes God is even just trying to stretch us. He's even stretching us out of our place of comfort, out of our place of complacency, out of our place of comfortability in the sense. Did I make that word up, or is that really a word? Comfortability. I'm gonna look that up when I get off this podcast. But even in that place, because we can get so comfortable, we can get so complacent, we can get it's a safe place. So I did a video on TikTok. I think it was Sunday night. I was at work. If you go and find me on TikTok and watch that video, don't judge me, because I got my scarf on. I was at work and I was getting ready to lay it down. And I remember this thing just hit me as I got off the phone, and I had to do it. And I was like, listen, I remember calling my daughter and I was like, Jayla, I'm about to post this TikTok because I feel this thing so strong in my spirit. I'm about to make this video. And she like, Ma, don't do that with that thing on your head. And I was like, listen, let me just put my disclaimer out there. Don't judge me, okay? Because I am at work and I'm getting ready to settle down and I'm getting ready to go sleep. Don't judge me, but I had to get this out. But nevertheless, I'm saying all of that to say, if you do go and watch that video, don't judge me because I got my scarf on. But God was giving me something when he was talking about vision and all of those things that he was giving me even in that moment. And I think I lost my train of thought when I was trying to put my disclaimer out there, because the Lord didn't tell me to do that. I was just doing it on my own. Y'all know how we be trying to like save face, right? So we be on here like, because we always want to come together, right? We don't ever want to give off anything. So we're always trying to make sure that we're together on things. And literally in my trying to make sure that you guys understand where I was coming from, I lost my train of thought where God was going in that moment. But nevertheless, just getting back to what I was saying, or where I think I was going in that particular moment. But I'm grateful just to be in a place where we can understand what God is doing, and not just understand what he's doing, but being that place where we trust God no matter what. We trust God no matter what he puts us through, no matter what he allows, because that's another thing. God allows things for a reason. All things work together for the good. Everything that happens in our life has a purpose. I say this all the time. Things don't happen just by happenstance. Now, don't get me wrong. There are things that we put ourselves in, situations we put ourselves in. There are things that we put ourselves through. Absolutely. And God, because he's so good, because he's so just, he allows us to come through those situations. He brings us through those particular situations. Literally, I promise I'm going to say this and I'm going to get into where I'm going. We were talking about Jehoshaphat on my Bible study group tonight. This was something that we was reading, 2nd Chronicles, and we talked about how God came through for Jehoshaphat. The very first time that God came through for him, it was a situation that Jehoshaphat literally put himself in. He put himself in the situation that he was in, and God, because he's so good, because he's so just, and because he gives grace, thank you, Lord, he was able to bring Jehoshaphat out of the situation, through the situation that Jehoshaphat literally got himself in. But the second time around, it was more of a partnership in, God, I trust you, but Jehoshaphat, I need you to trust me. I need to trust you as well. I need to know that I can trust you with this. And literally, those are things that God does. He puts us through things for a purpose, for a reason, not just because he's God, not just because he wants to get the glory, because God is going to get the glory out of his situations, but God wants to be in partnership with us. God wants to know, like, I can trust you here. Can I trust you here? When we're literally saying, God, I trust you, God is saying, but can I trust you? Can I trust you here? Can I trust you here to praise me even when it's hard, to, worship me even when it's hard? Can I, when things aren't, when your money is funny, or when your change is strange, just like the cliche that they say, or whenever, things ain't going right with the kids, or things aren't going right on your job, or when my marriage is struggling, or, my relationship is this or that, or when I'm struggling with my community, or, I'm feeling alone or abandoned or isolated, because, sometimes even God strips us and he'll put us by ourselves in that moment. I promise you, this isn't my topic. I don't know why I'm here, but I'm just following what the Lord is saying. But even in those particular moments when God allows us to be by ourselves, when he allows us to just sit, and we feel isolated, we feel alone, we feel like people are leaving us and we can't figure out what it is, and it's God in that moment. And so I'm saying all of that to say that God allows things to happen in our lives at times. Everything we don't bring on ourselves. There are certain things that we go through because it's a part of our destiny. It's a part of our journey. It's a part of who God is calling us to be. And we are literally the women for the jobs, right? I posted it on my Facebook today. But we are literally the women for the job. We're literally the ones that God has chose to go through this. I always say that my ordeal of the way that I grew up, the things that I went through with my parents, the rejection and the abandonment that I experienced in my younger days that continued to progress even in my adult days, it was all necessary. These were necessary things that God needed to do in order for him to do what he needed to do in my life. My purpose according to God may differ from yours. So you may not have needed that particular thing in your life in order for God to get the glory out of your life and do what he had to do in you. But for me, I understand that there were things, even as I continue to go through things that I've recently come through, things that I'm still going through, like I can see the hand of God on my life. I can literally see the hand of God in what it is that he is doing, what it is that he is stewarding in me. There's that word again. I can literally see it. And I understand that there were things that I had to go through. There were things that were necessary according to my journey. There were things that were necessary according to my purpose. There were things that were necessary according to the anointing that God wanted to put on my life. There were things that I literally had to walk through. There were things that I had to be put in the fire of so that I can help someone else come out. This is not a I understand what you're going through, or I can't imagine what it feels like to be here, but if I were here, this is no, baby. I've literally been in this fire. I've literally sat in this seat. I have literally walked this thing out when I had nothing else but me and God. I mean that like literally speaking. When I had nothing but me and God, I literally walked this thing out. And so in that moment, God will allow you to know your purpose for being. He'll allow you to know why you're in a place that you're in. And even if he doesn't reveal it to you in the midst of it, right? In the midst of going through it, even if God doesn't reveal it to you right there in the midst of going through it, I can promise you, I can guarantee you that it's all going to reveal itself in due time. And you will know exactly why you were where you were when you need to know it, when it needs to come to pass, when it needs to happen. In that moment, you're going to know exactly why God has you here. So let me get off of that. I don't know why God had me there. I didn't come on here to say all of that. But I like to follow the unction of the Holy Ghost when leading me. I like to say what God gives me to say, because ultimately this podcast is about he's worth the wait. So it's about waiting for the one that God has for us. It's about literally being in that place and position that we need to be in order to meet the one that God has for us. And whatever that looks like, making sure that even in our place, that we're pursuing our purpose, that we're doing exactly what it is that we're supposed to be doing. Because when God sends him, he's going to find us in work. He's going to find us doing what it is that he's calling us to do. So I believe that everything that God gives somehow or another aligns together. Whatever he allows me to say, whatever he unctions me to say on this podcast, it all aligns together. So I want to be very intentional and very strategic in that. The question that I got on today, let's jump into it. You guys ready? Let's jump into it. So today I was posed with the question of, why do we fall so hard for people who aren't good for us, or people who we typically wouldn't be with, right? When we're coming out of a relationship or marriage. And so when I was asked this question, the situation from whom I was speaking with, it was a very familiar situation, right? So it's easy sometimes for us to commentate on familiar situations. But when you step back and you really get into the gist of, this happens to a lot of people, this happens more often than not. Why do we do this, right? And so because I'm super transparent, I always like to find myself in situations, right? So I'm not that girl who likes to look at other people's lives and be like, oh my God, I can't believe that she did this. See, I'm not her. I am so intentional about my own life. I am so intentional about seeing myself in the spaces that I need to see myself. I need to see myself first, right? So I can help Jane Doe if Jane Doe needs help, when Jane Doe requests help from me, or, comes and asks or solicits, or however that thing is. But I'm not just looking at Jane Doe life on a regular, because that ain't my business, okay? Mind the business that pays. That's not my business. Anyway, getting into this. Why do we fall so hard for people who aren't typically people that we would be with, typically people that we would date? The very first thing that I thought about in this particular situation was the 80-20 rule, right? A lot of times when we are coming out of relationships, when we're coming out of marriages, and listen, no matter what the situation was, right? So everybody has a different reasoning, even for them coming out of a situation, coming out of a relationship, whatever the reasoning be. Everybody's reasoning is different, but I can almost guarantee that coming out of that relationship, there was something that you were missing. There was something that you weren't getting. There was something that you were lacking. There was something that there was a place where you was feeling really empty. And in that, I can associate the 80-20 rule, because 80% of what you need is what you get. That 20% that you're always missing out on literally is that 20% that glitters like gold. Okay? Like literally, it's so appeasing to you when you're not getting it, that it makes you feel like that it's way more purposeful, that it's way more important, that it's worth more than what you currently have or had. And you sometimes gravitate more to that versus not, right? So coming out of relationships, we are missing whatever. So I like to talk about me coming out of my marriage to my ex-husband. I can remember being in that place of just feeling, whatever our going through was. I talk about it a lot. I'm not, I always like to, I don't know if I want to use the word protect, right? But I don't ever want to come across as I'm still in that place, and it's definitely not a bashing, right? Because I don't believe in that. I don't. Listen, if you know me, right? If you know me on a personal level, being married for almost 14 years, I went through a lot of different experiences. But one thing that people can say that I did not do was bash my ex-husband. When we were together, I'm not bashing him when we're not. I'm just not doing it. It's not necessary, right? So even in our going through, I talk about his infidelity and my reasoning, right, for walking away at the particular time that I walked away. And if you've never heard this story, you're going to have to go back and find it on one of my other podcasts, because I'm not going to be able to go through the entire thing in this moment. But I remember when I got the permission from God, the reasoning for me even approaching God for permission to walk away was because I had been in a place where I knew that my ex-husband had cheated before. It wasn't new to me. But more so in the sense of it was something that I protected my children from for years. They would have never known because, I'm hitting stuff. They would have never known because I protected them from that. But when my children were made aware, it sat differently with me in my reasoning for, I am a wife, but I'm also a mother. And I'm raising two daughters, one that is now a teenager and one who's still a baby who has to grow into to be a teenager who's going to get into adulthood, like my oldest daughter. And it was important for me what I'm showing them as a mother. It was important for me what I'm allowing as a mother for them to see, because I'm their example. God is their ultimate example, but I'm their earthly example. I'm their mother. And so for me, I remember coming out of that marriage, because I'm going somewhere, so stay with me. But I remember coming out of that marriage, and I've been, with the same person for almost 2 decades, literally. We were married for almost 14 years, but we had been together for almost 20. So for almost 2 decades, half of my teenage years, all of my 20s, over half of my 30s, I was with the same person. So I was like, outside. I say this all the time, right? But it was something about this attention that I was getting that I wasn't getting within my marriage. That was something that was my 20, right? You get comfortable in the marriage with the same person. You don't pursue the same. Things aren't the way that they were, in the sense of, you don't have that same spark, and you can have it. Okay, I'm talking about my marriage. I'm not talking about everybody else's who've been married for that amount of time. But we didn't have that same spark as we were. We've been through a lot of things, and this was literally something that we were just adding on top of some other things that we had already encountered. So for me, the attention was everything. And I remember seeing that attention, which was my 20, that I had not had, and gravitating to it, right? Because I had never dated in my adult years. I'd only dated in my teenage years. I dated the man that I ended up marrying, and who, I birthed my 3 kids with. So I didn't have that experience. And that was something for me to have that experience. And so in the conversation, when I'm talking to her today, I'm like, that's the big logistic of why we do that, why we fall so hard for people that we typically know that aren't good for us, people that we typically know that we wouldn't be with, because they're offering us that 20% that we were missing in our previous relationship, and we're gravitating to it, right? We're gravitating to it. Then we're justifying our reasoning for being there. I can see us, and I went a step further, right? Because I'm super transparent. So I remember, even in dating one guy that I dated after coming out of my marriage. And I remember dating this guy, and there was something that he did that I didn't like. It was typically something that I would never, ever even be okay with, right? Because it was always I don't even like the way that looks. I don't like the way that tastes. I don't like the way that smells. I don't like the way that whatever. It was just something that I would never even gravitate to, because it's not who I am. But this was something that they did. And I remember dating him and being like, I don't really like that, but I mean, I don't really because this is what we do. We find reasons to justify why we need to be in a place that we know we don't need to be in. Right? We find a reason to literally be okay with that. We find that reason to literally be like, he drinks. I don't like drinking. Right? And I'm just using examples, guys. These are just examples. Don't take it personally. But it's he drinks. I don't even like drinking. I don't like guys that drink. Or he smokes. I don't like smoking. I don't like guys who smokes. Or he curses. I don't like guys who curse. Just anything that we know that we're not okay with. Anything that we know is not conducive to who we are. It's the opposite of who we are. Now, am I saying that we should be in a place of judgment? Absolutely not. Please don't take this wrong, what I'm saying, because I'm not saying that we need to be out here judging people and, if they do that, this and that, we just write them off and throw them away. Absolutely not. That is not what I'm saying. But I am saying there are things that should be non-negotiables for us. There are things that should be standards within us. Whatever my standards are, whatever my non-negotiables are, That's me. That's my relationship. That's what I desire. Whatever your non-negotiables are, whatever your standards are, that's you. I can't judge your standards. I can't judge your non-negotiables just like you can't judge mine. So if my non-negotiables is I don't want anyone who drinks. I don't want anyone who smokes. I don't want anyone who curses, or I don't want anyone who's not a believer, and I mean, we could really get into the logistics of that, but we ain't got that kind of time on this podcast. Not now. But we could really go there with that, right? But if that's a non-negotiable for me, and this is what he does not do, if he doesn't go to church, or if he doesn't have that right relationship with God, or if he isn't in that place where you know that you are called to be a wife. And I can't wait to get into this podcast. I am still getting my everything together that I want to talk about when I talk about the characteristics of a wife. How do you know that you're a wife and why, right? That's a podcast. So be looking out for that, because that one is coming. But if you know that you've been called to be a wife, if you know that you are a wife, right? Because we're not a wife when we get a ring. We're a wife before we even meet the man who has been called to us, or we have been chosen for. Whether you meet him the first time, the second time, or however, we are a wife in that moment. So if you know that this is who you are, and you know that it's important for you to have a kingdom man because you want to have a biblical marriage, or you want your marriage to reflect how God sees marriage, Christ and the church. Excuse me. If you want that to reflect, and he doesn't have a relationship with God, then that's a non-negotiable for you. That's a standard for you. And instead of you saying, you know what? Where are you? Oh, you don't? And then just walking away. It doesn't mean that you're throwing the person away. It just means that that person is not supposed to serve that part of your life that you're trying to put them in. It's a justification that we make. Okay, I know he's not there yet, but he say he loved God, and that, he's really gonna like start going to church and stuff. I remember this other guy that I was dating. Okay, don't judge me, because I ain't never dated. So I got my date on out here in these streets, okay? But I remember this other guy that I was dating, and I remember him, he was talking about, his relationship with God, and oh yeah, like I love God, but I'm still, in this place, and I want to get back to the place where I was in God, and things like that you can understand, you can relate to, especially as me in that moment when you step outside of yourself and you step outside of who God has called you to be. You know who God has called you to be, and you step outside of that, then you look at yourself like, yeah, I understand, because even myself wants to get back inside of that place. But then they'll go a step further where, what kind of steps are you taking in order to be, or in order to get to the place where you're not, you're not going to church. You don't have a church home. You don't even attempt to watch services or to feed your spirit, with, things on Sunday or any day, but typically Sunday, because that's like the church day, right? So it's like, even that as a standard or non-negotiable, like you be okay with that. We don't have to justify where they are going to be. We got to look at them for where they are. I used to talk about potential all the time. And people used to ask me, right, what my thought process was on potential. And I remember always giving the same answer. Potential can be good or bad, right? We shouldn't marry potential. And I stand on that. I stand on that because I think that in that phase of seeing the potential, you've got to see it in that phase, whether you're dating, in a relationship, prior to getting married. You've got to see exactly what's being birthed from the potential that you see. There are a lot of people in this world with potential. Listen, we all got potential, right? but it's how potential is being cultivated. It's how potential is being stewarded. It's what we're doing with the potential that really matters. So it's like, I have the potential to do all of these things, but if I'm not doing anything, then that's just complacent potential. That's potential that's just sitting. So we want to be able to know these things, right? We want to be able to see and know that these things are not just things that we're sitting on. We've all got the potential to be more than what we are, but it takes effort. It takes work. It takes dedication. It takes, all of these things to really bring potential into fruition. So we have to make sure that we don't just fall into that place of potential. So I'm saying that because I'm like, we find reasons to justify whatever. He's got the potential to be a man of God because he loves God, right? He loves God. He wants relationship with God. He wants to go to church. He wants to get in that place with God, where he once was. But where is the work? Where is the work that supports that? Where is the work that supports what he's saying? Where is the evidence that backs up what he's saying? Like, we have to look at that, and we have to stop finding, literally, we have to stop trying to make excuses, justify our reasoning for being there when we don't see the things that we need to see. And it's super important for us to make sure that we go through the healing process. It's super important for us to make sure that we go through that healing phase. Like, listen, and don't get me wrong, healing is ongoing. So it's not like, oh my God, I'm in a phase of healing for a month and then I'm out of it and I'm healed and I'm better. No. Let's take the word phase out. We need to go through the healing process. And I say process because process is something that is ongoing. We need to be healed, guys. Listen, I don't suggest, and I did it, so there is no judgment on this podcast, okay? I am your girl, Sharon Tillman. I don't have no room to judge nobody for nothing, okay? Because my life over here is not perfect, right? But I literally understand this because I was here. We have to be healed. We have to start our process of healing before we jump into another relationship, before we jump into another situationship, because sometimes we have situationships, right? When we don't know like where it's going, what it's doing. And I hear people say, or I had this one person to say, I don't like the fact that, she always refers to certain relationships as situationships. Well, certain relationships that are not defined as relationships, they're situationships because we don't know what we're doing. What are we doing over here? What are we in? If we're not in a relationship, if we're not building for, a future, if we're not in preparation for marriage, if we're not intentionally dating because this is where we're going, then that's kind of what it is. I don't want anybody to take it as I'm being rude about it or just throwing out labels here. Like, this is what it is. We find ourselves in these relationships, in these situations, and we like to mark them complicated. Are they complicated or are they just undefined? Right? Okay. So we need to go through our healing process, right? One thing that I learned about myself, right, is when you come out of a relationship and you jump into another relationship or another situationship, you don't get to really learn you. So as I said, I dated my ex-husband in high school. From high school, we got married. We had our son. We got married, and then we had our daughters, and we had this life of almost 20 years together. The Sharon that I was when I met him at 15 was not the Sharon that I was when I came out of that marriage at 35. It wasn't the same girl, right? I wasn't the same person. My views had changed. My expectations had changed. The things that I desired in life were not the same. Who God was in my life at 15 and who God was in my life at 35 was not the same. Understanding who I was when I met him at 15, I had no idea who I was, who I belonged to, what my purpose was, who God was calling me to be. I didn't even think that God was calling me to be anything because my life was so broken and shattered and all of these things. There was no purpose for my life according to me at 15 because I'm like, I come from this. I don't have this. I don't have that. I don't even have a stable belonging, like a stable place of feeling like I have somewhere to belong. Like, there's no way that God could use someone like me. So I never would have even considered myself as someone who could be used by God. But the person that I was at 35 was different. I literally had to be self-aware of the difference in those two people. So now what I wanted at 15, I don't want at 35. Or what I didn't want at 15, I now want at 35. You know what I'm saying? So it was literally like I had to get to know Sharon. I had to get to know a Sharon that wasn't attached to anybody. I had to get to know a Sharon who was in a different place in her life, a Sharon who had been through some things, but that God had brought her through more things, a person that I knew that God had a plan and a purpose for. I had to get to know exactly who I was in this particular space in my life. And when we jump out of our relationships, especially of long term, whether it be 14 years or 20 years, whether it be 25 years, listen, even if it be 5 years, the person that you was when you went into that relationship is different. Even the things that you went through while in the relationship, they shaped you differently than you were when you went in. Let's get to know her. Let's get to know exactly who she is. Let's get to know where she is in her life at this point. Let's talk about those non-negotiables. Let's talk about those standards. Let's talk about those expectations because I know who I am, right? So at 35 years old, I knew exactly who I was in God. I knew who Christ was calling me to be. Even coming out of a divorce. This is why we are not defined by our titles. Who I am I'm not defined by my job or things that I do, because if God ever takes that away, I can't be lessened of who God has called me to be if I don't have that title that represents it anymore. So even coming out of a divorce, I still knew exactly who God was in my life. And I still knew exactly who God was calling me to be. I needed to get to know me in that space. What the things were that I desired. Because I love marriage. I absolutely love marriage. Am I going to get married again? Absolutely. You guys can take that check to the bank and cash it. Absolutely. I love marriage. I desire marriage. I love it. I love what marriage represents. So even in my divorce, I knew that one day I wanted to marry again. But this time I wanted it to look different. I literally want the person that God has chosen for me. I know who I am. So I don't want anyone who's still trying to figure out their life. I don't want anyone who's in between that place of, I love God, but I'm still trying to figure out, if I want to be here or there, or a 40-year-old rapper. I'm just using that for an example because, 40-year-old rapper is that hit, right? But it really brings clarity to what you're saying. Being defined by not your job title, but who God is calling you to be. But what exactly is he calling you to be? What is your purpose according to him? What are you supposed to be doing? What are you stewarding in your life at this moment? Thank you, God, because that word just keeps, I'm telling you, it just keeps resonating. What are you stewarding in your life at this moment? Like literally, what is it? I know these things about myself. I can't find myself in relationship with someone that does not. It's almost like being equally yoked. Literally. This is where we could even define equally yoked. What place are you in? What are you doing? Now, I'm not saying that God can't use you in a way to help someone else come into the place where they're supposed to be. Absolutely not. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is, and I'm just talking about me, guys, listen, I want you to get to know you, evaluate you and what you need and what you like and what you desire from your husband, or if you're currently married, from your current husband. How can I cultivate my relationship that I'm currently in? I never want people to think that if you're already married, you're doomed. Absolutely not. You have an advantage because you've already got the purpose, the person that's been chosen for you, or the person that you're with. Cultivate that. Cultivate that. Get into that space where you guys can literally take off and rock it together. Cultivate it. Use it as an opportunity to really cultivate who God is calling you to be individually as well as collectively within your union. I want a purpose partner. I want a person who literally is in alignment with who God is calling me to be. These are things that I didn't know at 15. I didn't know that at 15. At 15, all I knew is I wanted a place of belonging. When I started dating my ex-husband at 15, and when we had our son and we got married, I felt like I finally belonged somewhere. I spoke at my brunch on last Saturday, which was amazing. So I am, my videographer is working on footage. I'm trying to get some things out as like some speaking points where I can do some reels and some TikToks, and I'm going to put the video out on YouTube so that people can go watch. But I spoke about my identity being found in my ex-husband. Like literally, people didn't even know my name at one point. They would be like, oh, that's such and such's wife. And I was okay with that because finally I felt like I belonged somewhere. I fit somewhere. But that girl is not the person that I was when I came out of that marriage at 35. And so the point that I'm making here is we really have to get to know this new person, this new phase of life that we're in. And we can't do that if we don't take that time and space to really heal and to really sit with ourselves and get to know who we have become while in that relationship. And then we can really sit down and we can think about our non-negotiables. We can really sit down and think about our non-tolerables. We can really sit down and think about the things that we just don't want to do. There are things that I just won't do within a relationship. I won't do them. And then we are we're in the driver's seat of it now. So we're not justifying anything just to be in relationship. Another thing that I find very vital, and I'm going to end this thing in the next few minutes, but another thing that I find very vital, like literally, is being comfortable in the space that I'm in, right? And so I don't know if it's because I've been in relationship for so long. And a lot of times people think that, oh, when you're in relationship, you don't know what it feels like to be alone. But I beg to differ, because sometimes you can be in a relationship and feel more alone than you feel if you're not in a relationship, because you're not whole. The space that you find yourself in when you're whole, it completes you. So you're not, it doesn't mean that you don't desire a thing, but you're not in a place of waiting for it to the point where you are becoming frustrated, or you're becoming, I'm looking for the proper terminology to put here, but you're not just settling into a thing because you want it so bad. Like, we don't overly desire a thing so bad that we settle into it because we want it so bad. I'm trying to clean it up, so I hope that came out right. But you become not complacent, but you become, I don't know, maybe because it's so early in the morning, like my vocabulary ain't like where it wants to be or where I would desire for it to be in this moment. But what I'm saying basically is you're whole, right? We can be whole as single women. And a lot of times we don't realize or understand that, but we need to be whole. Going through that place of healing, that place of process, we begin to be whole again. We get to know exactly who we are, who God is calling us to be. We get to figure out this new person in this space, and we're whole. So when we do go into a relationship, we're whole. So we're not overly anxious. We're not overly desperate. We're not overly desiring anything to the point where we've got to jump into something and settle in. So here I go back to that driver's seat. Now we actually get to sit in the driver's seat, and our dating even looks different. Listen, my dating looks different in 2023. I don't just get, everybody doesn't get to go out with me. Everybody don't make it to a dinner. It might be that initial visit and I'd be like, yeah, no, or it might be an attraction there at that initial visit. But after that first or second conversation on the phone, I'm like, yeah, no. And listen, that's not to be arrogant. That's not to be judgmental. That's not to be like, oh my God, they just throwing themselves at me, because that's not the case, right? The men they literally do come like a dime a dozen, right? But they're not like, oh my God, it's like a man on every corner, like the ABC store. It's not like that. But it's literally you being in the driver's seat and you getting, because you know who you are, because you're in your place of healing, because you're whole. You don't have to settle into a thing. You don't have to allow things that are not conducive to who you are or who you've been called to be. You don't have to justify a reasoning to stay in relationship with anybody because you're lonely or because you want companionship. You don't want to be alone. We've all been there. Being in a relationship for so long, you do feel better when you feel better together, right? But it doesn't, being together, feeling comfortable being together doesn't compare to being whole and by yourself and waiting for the right person, because we can be together and in our minds we feel better, but we're not. We're incomplete. We're not whole. We're broken. We're hurting. We've got all of these things going through. Listen, I can really get into that place. I can't wait. I feel like God is really calling me to do like a wife series, right? And where I really just want to speak to wives. I really just want to speak to not just people who are already wives, but people who are preparing to be wives, but just talk about all of the different places that we find ourselves in as a wife. But you can be together and feel all of these things and have all of these things happening for you. But you can be by yourself, single, right? Because listen, single doesn't mean you're alone. Let me clarify. Single doesn't mean you're alone. It just means that you're not married. And that's okay. I am single until somebody puts a ring on my finger. I don't believe in having a boyfriend at this age. Okay? I'm too old for that. My daughter is going to have a boyfriend soon. I'm too old to have a boyfriend at this age. But single doesn't mean you're alone. But being single and whole can be way more beneficial, can be way more rewarding, than being in a relationship and not whole and broken and not where you need to be as an individual, right? Because marriage works when two whole people come together. Two whole people come together. Not you're whole and he's half, or you're half and he's whole, or both of you are halves trying to create a whole. That's not what that means. You both need to be whole, and getting married at a mature age helps us to understand this. Now, don't get me wrong. There are some mature people out there at 19 and 20. There are some mature people who know exactly where they are or where they're going in Christ at that age, but everybody's not there. And if you don't know who you are as an individual, you are not ready for marriage. I'm going to say that one more time for the people in the back. If you do not know who you are and who Christ is calling you to be, you're not ready for marriage, because you've got to know who you are first. I can't wait to dive into this series that is going to come. I can't wait to dive into it. So I'm going to wrap up here. But listen, that question, it was a good question for me, because like I said, it really helped me to think about, the situation at hand that I was very familiar with. But you think about your own life and you think about your own situation. And I'm like, how many people literally do this? And I've said this before. I'm not saying that it doesn't work for some people. There are some people who can get out of a relationship and they can jump right back into a relationship, and they may, live happily ever after. I don't know, but I'm not saying that it doesn't work. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is getting to know the person that you are before going into your next relationship is imperative. You want to know exactly who you are in this space before going into your next relationship. It is super imperative for you to know, so that you can sit there and be okay with your standards. You can be okay with your non-negotiables, because you know who you are and you know what you deserve. You know what you desire in a husband, what you desire in life, what you desire in relationship, and you can choose properly, right? Listen, it doesn't mean that we're judging. I'm not saying that I want anything bad for you. I'm just saying that you're not the person that has been chosen for me. And that is okay. Listen, and we have to learn to be okay with things like that. We have to learn to be okay with it. But it's super imperative that we don't allow that 20% that we lacked in a relationship to ever make us forfeit getting the 80%. Let's not do that. And we don't ever want to find ourselves justifying our reasons why we need to be in a place that we're in. If you find yourself always having to justify your reasoning for being there, you probably are not supposed to be there. That is probably not the situation for you. If you find yourself always having to justify, always trying to justify, if you find yourself always making an excuse for why you're here, or for what they're doing, for a behavior, or for something that you know is contradictory to who you are, who you've been called to be, and you're probably not supposed to be there. Accepting that and being okay with it is where you need to be. Let's heal, guys. It's so imperative that we heal first. It's so imperative. Let's do it. Let's do it. Because we don't want to keep jumping in and out of relationships. We don't want to do that. We don't want to keep jumping in and out of relationships. We don't want to have a boyfriend here and then a boyfriend here and then a girlfriend there and then a girlfriend. We don't want to do that. We want to make sure, because even in your dating phase, if you know marriage is your desire, you want to be very intentional there. And so in order for you to be intentional there, you need to know what your non-negotiables are. You need to know what your standards are. You need to know what you're looking for. And you can't be looking for anything that you're not. I say it all the time. We as women, we have lists, right? We always got these lists. And I'm not saying that men don't have lists. I'm just speaking from the woman because I am a woman, okay? We have lists. We have things that we want and desire when it comes to relationship. But a lot of times we're not making sure that we are meeting the standards of somebody else's list. Are we meeting the standards of the list that we're asking for? Or are we just expecting him to come and be fully together while we're still working on getting ourselves to that place? No, it's imperative for us to do the work that we need to do even right now in our singleness, in our space of not being in relationships, so that we can be intentional with that dating. I am intentionally dating to marry. And you can be intentional there because you understand what your non-negotiables are. You understand what the standards are. You understand exactly what you need and what you desire, but you also understand who you are and what you have to give. What do you have to offer? What are you bringing to this relationship? And I'm not talking about just bringing home the bacon and frying it up. No. What are you bringing to this relationship? Ask yourself that. I know what I want, but what am I bringing? I know what I desire, but am I what he desires? That has been my prayer, as I prepare myself for my husband. And as I don't want to say manifest, because manifest nowadays has been literally just taken, and everybody is manifesting stuff all over the land and the region and the cultures and the countries, right? But even in my place of speaking my husband into my life, speaking him into fruition, right? I am also praying that I am what he's praying for. I'm praying that God, even as I'm praying that he's all of the things that I am desired, that I am all of the things that he is desiring. And that I am praying and covering him now, even before he gets here, even before I meet him, because I ain't met him yet. But even before the time comes when he and I are supposed to come face to face, I am already praying and covering him now and making sure that not only is he what I'm praying for, but I'm what he's praying for. We can't take the time out to really do this if we don't take the time out to heal before we jump into another relationship. So let's just make sure that we do that. Let's make sure that we heal. Let's make sure that we don't justify. And let's make sure that we don't take that 20% and like the old folks say, turn like a molehill into a mountain. I think I'm saying it right, and if I'm saying it wrong, forgive me. Charge it to the head and not to the heart, because it's early, okay? But taking a molehill and turning it into a mountain. We don't want to turn that 20% into a mountain and make it so much bigger than that 80% of substance, right? Come on, guys. Listen, this was such a good topic on tonight. It was such a good question. And so I love when people do this. I love when people bring me stuff like this, because it definitely helps. Anytime that I get to really sit down and think about it and process it for myself, it's like I always get a revelation out of it, to where I can always come and share, because I know that we're not the only ones. I know for sure that she's not the only one, that I'm not the only one who's been here, and that someone is here right now. Someone is going to get here. Someone may need this a little bit later. So I love this. If you have questions, if you have things that you want to ask, if you have things that you want to know, if you got things that you want me to talk about so that you can get what you need, inbox me, DM me. All my social media handles are I am Sharon Tillman. I am Sharon Tillman Instagram. I am Sharon Tillman TikTok. I am Sharon Tillman Twitter. I am Sharon Tillman, or Sharon Tillman, and I am Sharon Tillman Facebook. I got an I am Sharon Tillman YouTube, as well as the He's Worth the Wait YouTube. So the He's Worth the Wait YouTube is strictly for podcasts. But I need to grow all those pages out there. So come on, like and subscribe to these pages and these channels, and, help me get these numbers. But, also, if you're listening to it on Apple and Google and Spotify and iHeart, make sure that you leave a comment or leave a review. Make sure you like it. Make sure that you're following it so that we can start getting some credits over there as well, and start really placing on these charts. So I thank you guys so much for tuning in. I thank you guys so much for allowing me to be a voice of reasoning for you in this moment. Thank you so much for joining the He's Worth the Wait podcast. Until next time, I am your host, Sharon Tillman. I love you and have an amazing week.